Hello, and welcome to another Healing Place segment. This month, we want to talk about what happens after the grief cycle. Many of you have heard about the grief cycle, the 5 stages of grief, starting with denial, then bargaining, then anger, depression, and acceptance. And we all know that the grief cycle can have many different touch points. It's not just in a row: denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. It can turn around, go backwards and forwards. You can be depressed, then you can feel denial again, then you can feel acceptance, then you can go back to anger. And it takes everyone a different time to get through the grief cycle. But what happens after you get through the grief cycle? What happens next? Many of us think that after we go through the grief cycle and we hit acceptance and we've been there for a while, that the grief cycle is finally complete. But I'm here to remind our listeners today that grief is something that does stay with us. It takes different forms over time, but like I tell my clients all the time, when you injure yourself, you may have a wound that heals, but it often leaves a scar. And that scar maybe makes you look different, or every time you look at the scar, it reminds you of the injury. Grief is the same way. So a couple of things that you want to think about if you're 1, 2, 3, 4 years within your grief. Once you've gone through the grief cycle initially, you want to remember what your triggers are, your grief triggers. Special holidays, special birthdays, anniversaries are going to make you think of your loved one. So you want to prepare for that. Maybe prepare some time by yourself so that you can cope after the event and process your grief. You also want to get back to therapy, possibly. Maybe you've started therapy or you've never been in therapy, but you've wanted to consider therapy. Clients often tell me after 3, 4, 5 years of losing a loved one, when they come back to therapy, they're frustrated because they're thinking, I should be healed by this. But grief, again, is something that stays with you. Don't be ashamed to go back to therapy. We're always changing and we're always growing. We create new perspectives on that loss. You know, when we have a loss at 15, the way we process it then versus how we process it at 35 is different. And like I always tell my clients, once you stop growing, you stop living. So don't be afraid to go back to therapy or to start therapy, to go through another journey through your grief. And lastly, start a healthy routine. Healthy routines can really help you manage your grief over time. Exercising, meditating, prayer, all of these activities have been known to really decrease depression symptoms and anxiety symptoms. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.